Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty RoundTable Radio Talk Show.
Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. Sam Bushman, live, hardest-hitting news the networks refuse to use on the net. Radio, TV, it's everywhere, baby. Spread the word. We've also got one of the Big Mig brothers on, Lance Migliaccio, with me, thebigmig.com. He's also available on Rumble and just about everywhere, and hopefully he'll get his YouTube account back. Did you get that back yet, Lance? Welcome.
Hey, good morning, Sam. I want to say good morning to your audience. Happy to be here. Yes, as a matter of fact, I did get back my YouTube account. I didn't get back the original.
They let me have to start over.
They're making me start over. I lose my 26 or 7 or 8,000 subscribers, and I get to start from scratch. But look, it was better than a flat no. But of course, I guess my next truth bomb might just get me that suspension once again. So we'll see what happens. Hope for the best. Expect the worst.
The shadow ban's somewhat permanent when they make you completely start over. But anyway, our prayers are with you, and we pray the account grows, and we pray that Donald Trump's pushing back and a change of administrations can change the game there too. R.I.P. to our dear friend Scott Adams, 68 years old, battle with cancer. He basically reflects on his life in his latest release after his death, and most importantly, he doubled down and became a Christian, embraced Christianity, says Jesus Christ is his Lord and Savior, and I say amen to that, Lance.
Yeah, no doubt, the iconic cartoonist for Dilbert, but I was actually very surprised. I did not realize, I know there was some posting I saw about him struggling with being able to walk, that the prostate cancer had spread to bone cancer, but I did not realize that it had accelerated so quickly. So my heart goes out to him and his family. It's a big loss. He was a very creative guy, well-spoken, interesting character online. He had a real interesting social media, presence. So we're gonna miss him.
He did. In a lot of ways, he was a truth teller too. We really celebrate that too. So rest in peace, brother. Our prayers are with your family. Just so you know, silver popped above $90 an ounce, Lance.
Yeah, boom. That's all I'm going to say. I've been talking about silver and gold on my show for about 2 years. Had you done that, you would have gotten in at the 20s. Beats the S&P 500, beat Warren Buffett's numbers, probably even beat Nancy Pelosi's numbers, I think, silver. It might have been better than she. Yeah, it may not be possible,
but
come on. Maybe I'm stretching it. Maybe he didn't beat Nancy Pelosi. Maybe silver has.
She's got gold in her holdings, so she's got that one too. You just don't know that yet.
Yeah, no doubt.
The bad company sings silver, blue, and gold, the color of the sky, I'm told. There you go, man. Silver above $90, gold above $4,600 still. The stock market down. Trump's on a power trip. Let's talk about that real quick. 2 women are vying for Venezuela's top spot, if you will. And they say Trump will decide. I'm not comfortable with removing one leader. No elections. Donald decides who the next leader is. I'm telling you, man, the international pushback on that is going to be tremendous. Who does America think they are? Who does Trump think he is? But it gets even worse than that, because then Trump gave his take on executive power, Lance. He says only morality can stop me. That's something the founders never really intended. Donald Trump told the New York Times, and I'm not a fan of the New York Times, as you know, but they asked him, they said, hey, is there anything that can constrain your global authority? And he said, no, only my own morality, only my own mind. That's the only thing that can stop me. And my response to that is, are you kidding me right now? Those kind of statements globally just smack of just like a thug. Hey, I'm going to take over Greenland. I already ousted the guy in Venezuela. I'm the one that's going to decide. Nothing could stop me, buddy, except for my own personal morality. I mean, those kind of statements are virtually psychotic. They're crazy, Lance.
It doesn't surprise me. Of course, Donald Trump's always had a very bold ego. I'm actually shocked. I thought the New York Times had gone out of business, Sam. I thought they were gone.
He said they were doing that, but he's done nothing but giving them mojo. They've been growing in their readership and listenership ever since Donald and them have had the fight. So either it's unintended consequences or that's what he's intended all along. Can't be sure, Lance.
Yeah, you might be right. But listen, I agree with you. You know, you have to be cautious about what you say out in public, whether or not he believes what he's saying or whether or not he's doing it. I've seen him do quite a few things like that are misdirection when he creates some overly bold statement in the hopes that it'll kind of send the press in one direction. Is it a strategy or does he truly believe it? I don't know what to think about that.
It doesn't matter either way, though, because you know what? The liberals are going to use that against him in the 26 election cycle. The world and leaders can use that against him for a variety of ways. For example, Russia saying, hey, we'll help you go ahead and take over Cuba or whatever in a way to kind of solidify what they're doing and say, see, Trump does it too. I mean, this expansionism and this reckless statements is kind of a problem. And then Donald's flipping people the bird. Now you can say, well, he went to New York on everybody. And, you know, I guess it's not that big of a deal in our modern times. And it's very undignified of the president of the United States to literally be flipping people off. I mean, come on, Lance.
You know, I get it. But like I said earlier, you can take the boy out of New York. You can't take the New York out of the boy. You know, I grew up in Fordham Road in the Bronx. You know, at my age, I might have walked down there and thrown blows with the guy on the floor. I have to say that, you know, in one way, it made me smile when I saw that, because here's a guy that's been attacked nonstop. Here's some guy calling him a pedophile from the floor of the Ford Motor, manufacturing facility. I kind of don't blame him. Look, is there a point that enough is enough, that you get tired of people calling you names, attacking you, making false claims? You know, they love to call him a felon. They love to say that he's a convicted rapist. They love to, which isn't true, but they love to do that. And now they like to call him a pedophile protector because of the Epstein files. Now, I'm not thrilled about the handling of the Epstein files. We're still talking about Epstein on our show. I'm sure I just got you banned on every platform for talking about Epstein on here. But the point is, you know, when is enough enough? And I have to say this. Listen, when I said it, I was like, man, I wish he'd been 50. I wonder if he'd gone down and gone to blows with the guy. Maybe the Secret Service would have stopped him. Or maybe they could have done like Casino in Las Vegas. The movie, and they could have taken the Ford Motor Credit guy back into the back room of the facility and had an on-hand discussion with him. I don't know. You know what? I kind of liked it. I understand that maybe it doesn't portray a global leader's perspective, but you know what? They're real people. And when is doing things like that not acceptable? Here's this guy on the floor. That's what he's going to do. That's his idea of addressing the president of the United States. I don't know.
It's out of line for sure. I just think the president of the United States, as a role model to children, should be holding the moral high ground. But hey, who am I? You know, I'm the guy that promotes the clarion call for civility, or a campaign for civility as well. And I just think, hey, flipping the bird, what does that accomplish? It might be funny, might create a bunch of memes. Pretty soon you're going to be buying shirts with President Donald flipping people off. On one hand, he'll have a flip you off. On the other hand,
you already have
hand
those.
Raised. Like,
I think those are already available.
So all I'm saying is that's the kind of stuff that I just don't think it bodes well for the president, the leader of the free world. But there is somebody who has way more allegations of being a pedophile and rape allegations and everything else, Mr. Bill Clinton, who defied a subpoena. So, you know, Steve Bannon went to prison for that. Is Bill going to prison, do you think, there, Lance?
You know, I have to say that, as usual, I'm not thrilled with our Congress. You know, I'm not thrilled with them on either side of the aisle. I predicted this when they put the subpoena news on air. I said they're not going to show up, but they should have known that. And my opinion is, why didn't Comer have it ready yesterday? Now he says they're going to discuss, go ahead and submitting him for contempt of court. They already knew Bill and Hillary were going to do it. Supposedly they notified him in writing. Why is it always next week, next month, next year? I'm not that guy. I'm an action guy.
And that's my problem.
I'd be snatching up Bill. I would have snatched up Bill and Hillary this morning, first thing. They wouldn't have rolled out of bed. I hit them at 3 a.m. just like they hit Roger Stone. I'd have had all the news agencies there, and I would have shackled them up, might have used some flashbangs and some tasers. I would have gone the full buffet of less lethal munitions if I was going for them, because that's how I feel about it. You can take
the boy out of Arkansas, but you can't take the Arkansas out of the boy. You know, there you go. Bill even has supposedly a black son running around claiming he's his child. Why don't we just do a DNA test and find out the truth on all this kind of stuff? But what they'll probably do is they'll probably just delegate Bill Clinton to be the ambassador of the Epstein Island. Don't you think that's what they'll probably do?
Well, he's fighting with Marco Rubio. I understand Marco Rubio's got all those positions. Although I'm battling with him, I want to be the governor of Cuba if that happens, because I also want to make you the head of I want to make you Secretary of State on casinos. That way we can keep all those casino licenses for themselves. Because I think it's fair enough. Donald Trump's made enough money during this administration with his crypto stuff. It's time to share the wealth. So Sam Bushman, Lance Migliaccio, governor and secretary of casinos in Cuba. That's my
Nothing
plan.
like casinos across the country to make sure the government, the House side wins every time by edict of law.
Exactly.
And if you find a way to logically beat the system, even though it's appropriate, legal, moral, no cheating, you still can't do it because the House is guaranteed to win. What a fraud based on our government. And ladies and gentlemen, I will say this too. What's going to happen with some of these countries? Greenland, there's supposed to be a delegation meeting with Trump and company now. I'm fine if we want to buy Greenland. I'm fine if the people of Greenland want to self-determinate or and they want to decide to join the United States. And if we create some, financial reparations to purchase it, like the old deal with the Louisiana purchase, things like that. I'm all in favor of it. The takeover of that country, though, by force or by military is an insane proposition that'll have blowback. The CIA's documented that principle like you've never seen before. Switching gears straight to our guest in seconds, you're watching the one and only hard-hitting Liberty Roundtable live.
Cybercrime is exploding. Take Sarah from Sweet Delights, whose world crumbled after having to close with not being able to bounce back. Small businesses are prime targets, but the right strategies can keep yours safe. Jay Hill, CEO of Network Providers, has co-authored The Cyber Playbook Simplifies Cybersecurity for Business Owners with Strategies to avoid costly breaches and fines. Build a strong cyber attack response. Secure your business with key protections. Cyber threats aren't slowing down, but you can stay ahead. Protect your business. Ensure its security for tomorrow. Get the Cyber Playbook today at networkprovidersinc.com/cyber-playbook or call 385-446-5500 now.
Are you ready to stand up for your community and support your local sheriff? Join the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association and become a vital member of the Sheriff's Citizens Posse. At cspoa.org, we empower citizens like you through weekly webinars, arming you with the knowledge to back your constitutional county sheriff. Together, we can uphold our Constitution and ensure liberty and justice for all. Your community needs you now more than ever.
This is a battle between truth and deceit. A battle between forces that would enslave this country in darkness and between a media that wants to present you with the truth. We are being censored. America's news outlets no longer provide the truth. 90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in fact.
TheEpochTimes.com.
Well, welcome back to Liberty Roundtable Live with your host, Sam Bushman. Of course, I'm along for the ride today, Lance Migliaccio from the Big Mig Show. As we always do, truth bombs, bringing it like Sam does every single episode. Today, we've got a great interview. Dr. Clinton Ohlers. He holds a PhD from the University of Pennsylvania. He taught and conducted research at the University of Hong Kong during the early COVID outbreak. He witnessed firsthand the initial institutional decision-making and public health responses that came along with the pandemic. And then he returned to the United States with family as the global pandemic response unfolded. And he's currently co-authoring a collection of documented case studies with Dr. James Thorpe, MD, detailing serious injuries and deaths linked to the mRNA exposure through blood transfusions. I've often called that the scamdemic. And he is now the Vice President Director of Media Relations for Safe Blood Donations. Wondering what's going to happen if you need a surgery and now you're going to get vaccinated blood? Well, he's got the solution. Let's get him in here.
Welcome, Doctor.
Great. It's great to be here.
I want to start out, though. So you were in Hong Kong when this thing broke out. Your research wasn't related to that at first, but it quickly changed to that?
That's correct. We were in Hong Kong. I was on a 2-year visiting research professorship position, and we loved Hong Kong, never wanted to leave. But ultimately, COVID broke out, and I had just finished up the 2 years of that position right when it broke out. And so we realized then it wasn't going to be good in Hong Kong. And we quickly returned. And, we returned very fast because when you talk about institute responses, there were so many things that were early indicators that we were under what was going to be a pretty big deception. And for us, it was looking at this hospital they were putting up in Wuhan. And I remember, the news was talking about how they were going to put up a hospital in like a week. And you're looking at the supposed patient deaths were like 200 and some, yet there's 47 excavators on this site. And Wuhan's a city of over 11 million people. And you're thinking something bigger has to be going on. But you wouldn't really allow yourself to think that because you didn't feel authorized to suppose people were lying to you. And of course, now we're on the other side of an enormous wake up. But yeah, it was COVID that drove us back. And, it's been quite a surreal ride since.
The COVID con has been crazy. It still continues to be psychotic and dishonest and immoral and everything else. We ought to have a repeat of the Nuremberg trials over this kind of stuff. But when you say they had all these excavators, what you're really saying is they had to bury a gazillion bodies they don't want us to know about, right?
Well, that was one of the things that caused us to leave when we did was we had contacts on the mainland who did business in Beijing and Shenzhen, which is very near us. We're about 15 minutes from Shenzhen, where we were living in Hong Kong. And they had word from doctors, apparently, that they knew through their CEO, who were saying, hey, we've been to Wuhan, and it is much worse than people are letting out, other than the government's letting out. You've got, they said, we estimate the infections in the millions, not the tens of thousands, and the deaths are the thousands of thousands, not the hundreds. And they were claiming that they were burying, that they couldn't even bury bodies. They were or couldn't get them to the cremation sites, and they were actually having to burn bodies in parking lots. In retrospect, there's been a lot of skepticism as to whether some of this was propaganda, but we did call contacts got a hold of other people in Beijing that we knew, and they said that was what they were hearing, that these reports were what they were hearing was true. So we knew that regardless, we're on the cusp of a global pandemic, and we knew we didn't want to be on the other side of the world when that hit the fan, right? And
amen to that.
In addition, we knew that the Chinese weren't going to get any. It was going to be a very tough lockdown after what they experienced with SARS, and we didn't want to be part of that either.
Now, it's interesting to me. I even had reports of friends that worked in all kinds of businesses in New York and everything else, and I heard that, hey, they were having to haul out bodies and do different things with bodies, and the freezer trucks and different things were being used to try to, and that it was a big fiasco, and it was way worse than we were told. I have firsthand evidence of people seeing those bodies right here in the United States. So don't make any mistake about it being real. The question is how much, where, when, by whom, how much are we lied to? But we know Fauci even lied on the origins. He lied on the science. He basically eventually said he was the science. But we really learned, doctor, and I'm hoping you'll speak to this, there's really no science about it. Everything they told us, everything they made us do was a lie and had no precedent, had no authority, had no scientific basis or reference point to speak from. And they literally attacked anybody who tried to stand up for real science, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It was really a period where everything was turned on its head. So the people putting out the fiction and the misinformation and an outright deception had control of media and had control all the way down, right? We eventually found out they had control of social media. They could cancel anyone they wanted. They had control of medical journals and were publishing fraudulent medical reports, like the Lancet one so famously withdrawn, but it was hardly the only one. And so then everyone who's being called aides of misinformation, those were the people who are actually looking at the real evidence and trying to get the truth out. The people that recognized early on, this does not look like it came from a natural interspecies transference of a flu. It looks like it was
market at all.
Yeah, it was a lab creation. That was actually one of the things that fostered our decision to return. Because I said to my wife, I said, look, it was not controversial in Hong Kong in January, February of 2020 to say that the most likely was the lab and not the Wuhan mark. That just seemed intelligent. Okay. And so when my wife and I made the decision, I said, we do have to take into consideration that this could be from the lab. And if it is, it means an escaped gain of function experiment, or it's a bioweapon. Okay. Now we'd probably say both, but or it's a bioweapon, and we don't want to be on the other side of the world when we find out what that means.
I hear that.
Now I had to come back to the U.S. to then be told that I was in tinfoil hat territory for thinking it might be the Wuhan lab. And that from very, very credible people. A good friend of mine, the University of Vanderbilt, just told me straight out, you're in tinfoil hat territory with this.
And my response is, what does that clown say now?
Well, yeah, he turned out to be wrong on pretty much everything. But
yeah, you've been punked, sir.
Yeah.
But that's the frightening part, right? When they control the narratives and they do it so effectively, in itself, that's the weapon. So that when legitimate people come forward, the Peter McCulloughs, the Dr. Stella Emanuels, the Dr. Robert Malones, the people that were actually, Dr. Pierre Corey, those people come forward and they give us the real information, and they're doctors with lots of experience with their own practices. They're seeing what's working, hands-on. And of course, they got attacked. They got defunded. They got, threatened with medical license seizure and fired from jobs. Some doctors are still dealing with the consequences of their position on not wanting to take the vaccine. I know one individual that had a very high level job at a large facility, and he's now having to travel to a completely different state. And he's now the head of the, emergency wards, which was a big step down for him. But because he would not take the vaccine as a hospital employee, he said it's experimental and I'm not going to take the chance. Turns out he was very right, but he still deals with the consequences. What kind of consequences? You saw this institutional response, Dr. Ohlers. Tell me, what do you think really, where do you think this all came from? When you look at the big picture, do you have any take on maybe where the actual, individuals that were behind this global scamdemic?
Yeah, the great whodunit question, sir.
Yeah, that really is the $1 million question. What I liked so much about Kennedy Jr.'s book, The Real Anthony Fauci, is that it wasn't primarily about Fauci. It was primarily about what Fauci was at the center of. And you could have swapped another villain in for Fauci. It didn't even have to be Fauci, right? So you've got this network that involves, our universities, this medical big pharma industrial complex, right? And this whole network, DARPA, all of these that are coming together and are corrupt, right? And you need a central axle, a central part of the spoke that's bringing all these pieces together. I think that's what Fauci was. And I think the reason he was so protected and so high paid, as others have pointed out, not because he was really an infectious disease guy, it was because he was really a bioweapons guy, first and foremost, that's what they were working on. And so we understand now why he was the highest paid individual in the American government, even above the president, and why he was so untouchable before Congress. And could lie with such impunity. He lied with such impunity. I would get my kids and take them in front of the television he came on. And I said, I want you to watch this because I want you to know what a great liar is like. Look at what a gentleman he looks like. Look at how much he looks like a grandfather, how his voice is so convincing. And then I knew everything that it was like if he opened his mouth, it was lying. And I pointed out to the kids. And so, but how do you live before Congress with that kind of impunity? So it's $1 million question who is behind this.
All right, we're interviewing Dr. Clinton Ohlers, ladies and gentlemen. He's got a PhD. He's a researcher. His mind turned to the COVID aftermath. Blood. He's promoting a program called Safe Blood. We'll talk about that in seconds. But when we get back, even the liberals are admitting the truth now that we've all been punked and lied to and manipulated massively over this COVID con. But how come Donald Trump's not at least even speaking out? He hasn't really said a word or taken responsibility at all. And I think the buck stops with the commander-in-chief, doesn't it? Let's get to that. Then we'll get into the details of what the good doctor has discovered and found and what he's doing about it to make your life safe. It's called Blood Safe. And we'll talk about it in seconds on the one and only hard-hitting Liberty RoundTable Live.
proclaiming liberty across the land. You're listening to Liberty News Radio.
Breaking news this hour from Town Hall. I'm Rich Thomason. Iran's chief judge is signaling fast trials and executions of those arrested in nationwide protests. The Iranian regime's brutal crackdown on dissent has claimed more than 2,500 lives so far. As he weighs options, President Trump is vowing to come to the aid of the Iranian freedom fighters challenging the tyrants in Tehran.
I say save their names because they'll pay a very big price. And I've canceled all meetings with the Iranian officials until the senseless killing of protesters stops. And all I say to them is help is on its way. You saw that I put tariffs on anybody doing business with Iran.
Where the nightmare continues.
A near total internet blackout means only a partial picture is emerging of what's happening in Iran. But what is getting out tells a terrible story, from grisly videos of open-air morgues to anguished messages expressing shock and fear. Iranian officials admit that thousands have died. They blame it on protesters they call terrorists. But human rights groups are gradually collecting evidence of a brutal crackdown unleashed by Iran to quell the unrest. Mass arrests and executions are part of it.
The BBC's Lise Doucette. President Trump threatening to cut federal funding to sanctuary cities and states, that as of February 1st. The Justice Department says there is no basis for a civil rights investigation into the fatal shooting of an anti-ICE demonstrator in Minneapolis. The Supreme Court appears likely to uphold state bans on transgender athletes participating in girls' and women's sports. Arguments yesterday on that before the High Court. At least 29 people killed. A massive construction crane collapsed onto a moving passenger train in northeast Thailand. Wall Street, the Dow down 207 points. More on these stories, townhall.com.
Wesley Financial Group is not a law firm.
I'm Chuck McDowell, founder of Wesley Financial Group. Did you buy a timeshare because they told you it was a great investment? That's a lie. Most timeshares can be bought online for $1. To find out what your timeshare is worth and to cancel it, call us today and we'll send you our timeshare exit kit free with all your options for cancellation.
Call Wesley for your free exit info guide. 800-893-2288. That's 800-893-2288.
My name is Whitney Allen. I am a widow. My husband Ryan died. We never thought in a million years we'd have to use life insurance. The unexpected happened. With Ethos, it is so fast and easy. It's 100% online. You can get a quote in seconds, apply in minutes, and get same-day coverage. No medical exams, and you can get up to $3 million worth of coverage through Ethos.
Get your free quote at ethos.com/term. That's ethos.com/term.
Time spent on application may vary. Online health questions required.
Looking for an IT partner that truly understands your needs? Managed IT Services is the answer. We meet with you regularly to discuss your goals and form a tailored technology plan. Our customers have called us a trusted advisor who delivers. When it comes to IT, we do it all. Firewalls, cloud storage, server migration, and more. Say goodbye to long-term contracts and hello to a team that earns your business month after month. Call 801-706-6980 now and let Managed IT Services transform your IT experience.
Have you ever had great honey? No, I mean really good, all-natural, raw honey? Well, now you can, thanks to localhoneyman.com. We can ship out our locally made honey all across the U.S. So don't worry, you won't miss out. Plus, Local Honeyman has so many different flavors, like Utah Wildflower, High Desert Delight, Happy Valley, and Blackberry, just to name a few. So purchase your delicious raw honey today at localhoneyman.com.
I believe there will come a time when we are all judged on whether or not we took a stand in defense of all life from the moment of conception until our last natural breath. As a teenager, I gave my first public speech in my church. My hand shook, my heart pounded. I thought to myself, I can't do this, but somehow I did, and because I wanted to talk about things that were important, I persisted. I chided my church as a senior in high school for not seeming to care about the not yet born, for looking the other way, and for not taking a stand on life.
I will be in earnest. I will not equivocate, and I will not excuse. I will not retreat an inch, and I will be heard.
One thing I promise you, I will always take a stand for life.
All right, we've got Dr. Clinton Ohlers with us, ladies and gentlemen, PhD, serves as Vice President and Director of Media Relations for Safe Blood Donations. You want to learn more? Safeblood.com. So, Doctor, right before the break, I kind of said, hey, you know what? Even the liberals and a lot of people are starting to admit we've all been punked and lied to over the COVID con, or the Fauci facade, whatever you want to call the thing. But Trump hasn't really backed away at all. He's just chosen to kind of say nothing and act like he's above the fray. But doesn't the buck stop with the commander-in-chief, for crying out loud?
Yes, I think it would do great good if Trump would openly admit to the disaster that this mRNA vaccine was. I think, my PhD's in history. I focused on history of science, right, which was what got me so interested in and alarmed by and feeling important to speak on the present day train wreck of science of the last 5 years, right? But in history, you have these individuals that rise at different times in extreme situations. Say Martin Luther would be a good example. And they have variant personalities. And I think with those intense personalities come sometimes intense blind spots or flaws. You were opening the show with some of these things that I think were concerning to all of us. And you think, how could someone say that? And I think with Trump, we need someone like Trump to accomplish overcoming the great evil that we're entangled in. At the same time, it's perfect. And I think probably the same ego that drives Trump is the same ego that makes it very difficult to, even if he knows it himself, to publicly come out and say that the pinnacle success of his first administration in response to the epidemic as he saw it, which was Operation Warp Speed, was actually one of the worst events in human history.
And my goal isn't to put egg on Donald Trump's face, but my goal is, if we're going to claim we're the most transparent president in history, if we're going to, really articulate that, hey, we're truth tellers, or we're, hey, the mainstream press is lying to you or whatever, it's time that you kind of start to realize, hey, you've got to take some responsibility when things don't go perfectly. And when you do, it's not a credibility crisis. Actually, it'll be a trust gain, which would be a credibility gain for the president if he would honestly do that. Again, it's already passed. There's nothing we can do, but honesty is the issue. So you're working with Dr. James Thorpe on these different studies relating to what you've discovered over the COVID con. Let's dig into those, sir.
Yeah, well, absolutely. We've got a number of cases which is why Safe Blood exists. We knew this was coming, and then eventually it did, right? That the blood supply would be tainted by the mRNA vaccines. It's very, really simple logic that if the stuff circulates in the bloodstream and continues to circulate, then it will put a certain number of blood transfusions at risk, right? And a certain number of people will be harmed. So we want to protect people against that. And so we
Doctor,
have
the problem is we really don't even know what that number is at this point, or how bad it can get. It might even feed on itself if we're not careful, right?
Well, yeah, these are the emerging concerns. Yes, with the discovery of the DNA, SV40, these components, and the problems with them self-perpetuating, and we can get to that because that's very important. So this has only turned out to be a larger and more alarming problem than we even at first believed it would be. But the initial, and so you're right. What we need more research to know exactly where we are, exactly how many people are being badly affected, exactly how much of that makes it into the blood supply, exactly how dangerous it makes those individual units of blood that have been donated by people that are mRNA vaccinated, how much non-mRNA blood we have so we can start using that for emergency situations. In other words, there's an enormous amount of work that needs to be done here. But part of the first part of that, and why Dr. Thorpe approached me to do this study, is because we need to present to science that this is real. We all know it's real, but it becomes especially real when you actually have a study. And as far as science and academic science is concerned, nothing's real to them that doesn't appear in a peer-reviewed publication. So what we're doing is we're collecting examples and case studies of individuals who had no exposure to the COVID vaccine prior to going to the hospital and receiving a blood transfusion, and then exhibited adverse reactions known to be associated with the vaccine and not known to be side effects of a transfusion.
In other words, these victims were vaccinated via transfusions, is what you're saying, right?
Exactly.
Lance, let's dig into the victims.
Yeah, I think this is interesting. There's a couple of them that we discussed on my show over there, the Big Mig Show on Rumble. And I think this, Doc, I think you should call out. I know we've got some information. A couple of them are really horrible. Wendy and Bill Heineck's story kind of jumps out to me. Maybe we should start with that one.
Yeah.
These are true accounts from real people.
I believe my husband Bill would be alive today if he had received Safe Blood.
Safe Blood saves lives and health by matching non-mRNA blood donors with transfusion recipients. Studies and patient reports show severe dangers of receiving mRNA vaccine components through blood transfusions. Protect yourself and your family by joining Safe Blood today.
Yes, that's Wendy Heineck who is speaking there about the passing of her husband, Bill. And I've spoken with her at length. This is an incredible story. So he went in the hospital, ultimately had, in a period of 2 months, had 22 units of blood transfused, had not had the vaccine. Now, the human body contains anywhere, depending on your size, from 13 to 17 units of blood. Okay, so he had a full blood transfusion plus. We know that at this point in time and since, 70% of the blood on the shelf can be presumed to be, or 70 to 80% can be presumed to be from mRNA vaccinated donors, right? And so it's absolutely guaranteed that the majority of blood that he got was from mRNA vaccinated donors. And very early on, they saw that he was having these reactions that were unexpected. And she, and eventually the lawyer she brought in on it, started looking at the VAERS report. They said, could these be reactions to the vaccine through the blood? They went to VAERS and they were shocked to see that everything he was experiencing was being reported in VAERS. And
VAERS,
others,
as they blatantly admit, is an underreporting of reality too. Let's be clear, sir.
Well, it's even more than that, according to Wendy and her lawyer. She said because they actually documented incidences that would be reported in VAERS, and then they'd come back a day or two later, and these had been scrubbed. So, yeah, it's assumed to be only capturing maybe 10% or less. I think even down to 1%, the actual cases, right? And then we know that they were scrubbing it too. There's strong evidence of that, just as they did with the Defense Department database. So, but tragically, what it meant for him is he lost his life. And it wasn't an easy death, right? I asked her, I mean, was this painful? She said it was terribly painful. They'd go to draw blood from him, and the clotting was so bad that sometimes they couldn't get blood on the first draw because the clots would pull back against the needle.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is why I'm saying President Trump needs to take responsibility here, because it's one thing for all this to happen. We can say they didn't know. I don't believe that for a second. I think they knew, and this was a psyop. That's my opinion, to which I'm entitled. But whether they knew or not, whether it was intentional or not, all those things, at the end of the day, we know now. We've got the information we've had on from Tom Havlin. Now we've got the information on from this incredible doctor breaking this down for us. And what we need is Operation Safe Blood. We need a fast track Safe Blood program ASAP. And I think that future deaths or hopefully preserve life literally depends on this, right, doctor?
Yeah, well, that's absolutely what we believe. That's why we exist. There ended up being a whole number of these cases, like I said, that we're documenting. But the important thing is that we know that in the best case scenario, we know that the risk is not zero. Right? If I have a option to go in and get a medical procedure done, and some part of it contains risk, and I can reduce that risk to zero, would I not want to do that? I mean, who wouldn't? That's the only thing that makes sense. And we know that blood transfusions now do not have a risk of zero. I mean, they never actually had a risk of zero, but we want to reduce the mRNA risk to zero. Okay. And that we can do. And we can do that through blood that's from non-mRNA vaccinated donors. And then we can start sorting out how bad the damage is, how we adapt more creatively as we have more research and information. But in the meantime, people need to keep themselves safe, just as they needed to keep themselves safe in the 1980s when the AIDS crisis came up. There was, again, a long delay, a long flash to bang between when people knew that lightning had struck and when a solution finally came, right? That took 8 years. And you don't want to be a person stuck in those intervening 8 years who is a casualty.
Amen. I think we need Nuremberg-style trials for this. I wonder what Donald Trump's going to do, if anything. I certainly think he has responsibility. We're talking to Clinton Ohlers, PhD, about safeblood.com. And I want to know where RFK Jr. is on this thing, too. Then we'll get to case study, too. Hang tight. You're watching Liberty Roundtable Live.
As you are aware, America is divided over every fault line possible. This is intentionally fostered by those who do not love God, family, or country. We believe a peaceful future as a free people absolutely depends on civility. Clarion Call for Civility is looking for funding and volunteers at every level to make our hopes and efforts a reality. Please donate, sign our pledge, and help us in our sacred cause. Please visit callforcivility.com for more details. Callforcivility.com.
Bypass the mainstream narrative with Liberty News Radio at libertynewsradio.com. Engage with charismatic hosts live or on demand. We cover the crucial news focused on God, family, and country. News that other networks simply refuse to use. Think of LNR's hard-hitting news and podcasts at your fingertips, anytime, anywhere. Join us at libertynewsradio.com. Empower your day with the truth, because the truth will set you free. libertynewsradio.com.
As a parent, is receiving a faith-based, character-focused education for your children difficult to find? Do you believe that godly principles should be a central component in your child's education? Imagine a school where faith and integrity are at its center, where heritage and responsibility instill character. For over 40 years, American Heritage School has been educating both hearts and minds, bringing out academic excellence. This is the school where character and embracing the providence of a living God are fundamental, where students' national test scores average near the 90th percentile. With American Heritage School's Advanced Distance Education Program, distance is no longer an issue. With an accredited LDS-oriented curriculum from kindergarten through 12th grade, your children can attend from anywhere in the world. American Heritage School will prepare your child for more than a job. It will prepare them for life. To learn more, visit american-heritage.org. That's american-heritage.org.
All right, you got myself, you got Lance Migliaccio, the supreme leader of Cuba now, just by self-appointment. I'm also a self-appointed Trump advisor, and that's why I'm saying, Donald, you got to fast track safeblood.com, buddy. You got to get that done ASAP. People's lives depend on it. We're talking to Dr. Clinton Ohlers, PhD, about his incredible project, safeblood.com. We believe it's vital and will save lives. And we're talking about case studies relating to this. I mentioned RFK Jr. right before the break, and we will get into him, so just stay tuned for that. But we want to go to the second case study first, Lance, and kind of highlight this. I mean, these cases are just heartbreaking, Lance.
You know, they really are. And, you know, this is just a sample. I've seen so much of this online where people are talking about no history of blood clots in an individual, no issues prior to taking the vaccine. And so many people are suffering from the consequences of this. People are still looking at ways to get out the spike proteins out of their body. And of course, we were told the mRNA wasn't going to stay in your system very long, but that does not appear.
Yeah, we were also told it didn't cross the blood-brain barrier. We were told it didn't go through mother's milk, and now we find out it does all those things.
So let's talk about Correlia. I think that's pronounced correctly. Coral's story, Dr. Ohlers.
Yeah, so Correlia Corral, or Cece, as she's known, she, again, had to go into the hospital for a procedure December before last, and was, the year before that. And she went in for her medical procedure, and in the course of that, needed to receive 4 to 6 units of blood. Now, again, with a 70% chance that any one blood is going to be from a non-mRNA donor, we can assume statistically that she received guaranteed blood from mRNA donors. And at that time, there was a lot of, recent uptake for the booster. So, you don't know how recently some of those donors might have been boosted. In any case, she goes in for this procedure and doesn't come out now for 26 days. She spent 26 days in the hospital with pericarditis around her heart. And they had to drain the pericardial sac to get these clots out, clotting you were just talking about. They didn't know. I spoke at length with her husband, Matt Baker, and they did not know if she were going to live. They were thankful she did. That's how she spent her whole December and Christmas, was in the hospital.
Yeah, that's not a happy holidays, and we've heard there's so many of those stories, Sam, over and over and over again. And they want to sweep it under the rug. And Donald Trump, of course, Operation Warp Speed, maybe he was ill-advised, but I would rather he came out and embrace it. Let's take a page out of Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand. Let's take responsibility and just say, look, I got ill-advised. Here's the situation. There definitely were mistakes made. And we need to see what we can do to correct it. But these people are struggling.
And even if you don't want to take responsibility, even if you don't want to be that candid and truthful, you could just say, hey, we've discovered new information. We need safe blood now. I mean, you can even do that, Lance, and not even, if you're Donald and you just can't take that kind of a hit, you could at least do the right thing going forward, right?
And when does it become discriminatory for the unvaccinated? The fact that we can't request at a hospital in a normal process, we can't say, hey, I'd like to have unvaccinated blood. Because I know when I went in for my shoulder operation, not knowing, what was going to occur, and all they did was scope it. I haven't had a replacement yet. But I was concerned, and I asked a lot of questions. Of course, I was given this prohibitive price, $1,000 a liter or something to that effect, and that you had to pay. And I thought, well, that's really lousy. Why can't I just donate my own blood, a couple of days or a week before, and they can just use my blood if that's what's going to happen? And again, I didn't need any kind of, blood during that operation. I didn't realize it was pretty minor. And of course, that's where we're at. So, Doc, tell me about this. Let's talk about one of the worst cases. I want to make sure we cover this one.
Wait, we want to cover the CC video first, right?
Oh, yeah, please. Let's do that.
Let's do that. Let's play this video. Then we'll finish that and transition. Here we go.
Sure.
True accounts from real people.
After receiving a blood transfusion, I ended up in the hospital for 26 days with life-threatening pericarditis. If only I had known about Safe Blood sooner.
Safe Blood saves lives and health by matching non-mRNA blood donors with transfusion recipients. Studies and patient reports show severe dangers of receiving mRNA vaccine components through blood transfusions. Protect yourself and your family by joining Safe Blood today.
So let me ask you this, doctor. If you have bad blood, you get sick, you almost die, but you come out of it 26 days later, is there things they can do to replace some of your blood and get some of that bad blood out with Safe Blood also?
Well, I wish. This is the other $1 million question that you've asked, is what do we do for the vaccine injured and for people that have this in their systems? And that there's a lot of good people work very hard on this question, but it really, this was a gene therapy. Right? It was a gene therapy mislabeled as a vaccine, and people did not know what they were getting. And we don't know the long-term ramifications other than that they're worse than what we definitely were told, since we were all too flat out, but they're worse than we even were. Most people were concerned. There were a few leaders who like Sukarit Bhakti, eventually Peter McCullough, there were a lot of people out in front. Robert Malone came out, others who recognized this would be bad. But the more we're learning, right, the worse it is. What I'm happy for is that it sounds like about 60% of people who have had the vaccine are not reporting adverse reactions. Right? So hopefully there are people whose bodies is affected or didn't get as bad. A lot. But we don't actually have an answer to that question yet. I think we don't really know what clears people up, and we need to find out.
Dead people and super sick people that are in comas or in serious situations, they oftentimes don't report either, and we know they've been fudging a lot of the death certificates and everything else on this thing. But what's interesting to me about this is, yes, it was mislabeled, but let's be very clear. It was dishonestly intentionally mislabeled. They knew that it wasn't a vaccine. They knew that it was an experimental gene therapy study from the get-go. They knew that, and they used all the laws on the books to protect themselves from any liabilities or accountabilities, and partnered with the president and fast-tracked this. And this was an intentional, flat-out, dishonest manipulation of the public. And then anybody who spoke up and called the, game on the carpet, then they basically gaslighted and said, oh my gosh, these people are nutcases. You're a tinfoil hat guy. And they intentionally mocked and manipulated and destroyed the character, the reputation of anybody who told the truth, right?
Well, absolutely. Even people who were harmed. Look at Maddie DeGarry and what they did with her and her mother, Stephanie, when she tried to take out an ad, I think in the New York Times to warn people, and she blocked but what was so, I think, insidious about what they did with Maddie DeGarry is here was a young girl, 12 years old, wants to be part of the trial to roll out the vaccine for children, and that they're going to be heroes who help bring this vaccine to market for kids so that we'll stop the epidemic and move on with our lives. And she gets a whole series of classic reactions to the vaccine. I mean, severe, but they knew about these. They talked about them, this array of injuries as potential side effects back in October. The FDA and CDC did in a joint meeting. And
they virtually said they're a reality side effect. They're basically necessary and basically acceptable under the circumstances, is what they said.
We have it on print that they said we're going to be looking at these things like a demyelinating neuropathy and all of this stuff. Then when this happens to Maddie DeGarry, they don't report it. They put her in a basically in a psych ward in the hospital, saying it's all in her head. They gaslight this poor child who's suffering. They discipline her for not performing tasks she physically can't perform. It was just, it was Orwellian.
Who caused that though? People need to go to prison for this kind of stuff. Doctor?
Well, this was a case, I would attribute it to the primary investigator on this study. Del Bigtree did a great interview with Stephanie DeGarry on this, and they got to that issue, which is that in the smallest study of children that you had, if you had a single individual that had these kind of reactions, it would have scuttled the whole thing. And so they made sure that it wasn't reported. And that's the level of corruption that we're seeing at the scientific research level. It's how corrupt it's become that they would do this to children. But this corruption is outlined in the real Anthony Fauci. RFK Jr. talks about the bioinstitutes that are taking huge money from big pharma to run these studies at their universities, and they're basically cooking in favor of their benefactors.
Sam, the medical industrial complex and the pharmaceutical industrial complex, we have to ask ourselves this question, because when you talk about crimes, it's always about the mens rea, right? It's the mental state that you had the aptitude. If you didn't know you were committing a crime, then you didn't have the aptitude to commit the crime. But it's clear that this narrative control was weaponized against the American people. Here's a victim that had real consequences. And what do? They start planning, because, of course, she's supposed to be the perfect storm. We're going to use her to promote our alleged vaccine. Even the courts now say you're not supposed to call it a vaccine. But the point is, here they did. So they knew what they were doing. They planned on covering it up. They took the narrative and they controlled it because they wanted to perpetuate this value-added idea that the vaccine was going to protect you. It was going to be the ultimate solution. And when it didn't work the way they wanted to, they intentionally deceived the American public. And I believe that constitutes the mens rea of a crime for all these individuals that participated. So when you talk about the Nuremberg trials, I think this is so much more than the Nuremberg trials, because these people are guilty.
Hold on, everybody. Dr. Clinton Ohlers with us. We're talking about safeblood.com. In my humble opinion, if Donald wants to talk about emergencies, this is indeed one of them. Lives depend on safeblood.com. We'll talk with a good doctor and Lance Migliaccio more in seconds. You're watching the one and only Liberty Roundtable Live, syndicated by lovingliberty.net. God save the Republic of the United States of America.